Hey, it's Drake Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Welcome to another Retirement Readiness Thursday. Today, we're going to focus based on a couple of questions I got, where I normally call this like money in motion, where you receive a bunch of money, you're not 100% sure what to do with it. Do I invest it? Do I spend it? Am I going to pay taxes on it? There's so many questions that we end up having. And so, whether it's an inheritance, whether it's a bonus, whether it's like a divorce. I mean, it could literally be anything. And we just call it money in motion. Like, hey, something's going on in my life. I have money that I don't normally have. What do I do with it? And so today we'll go through a few case studies where I'll be able to just show you a handful of things you want to think about, right? Like that's really what it comes down to. The way I feel about it, and that's why I had titled my book that way, is the if I knew then approach. And really, I just have that feeling all the time. I don't know if you do. If you do, let me know in the comments. But it's like, oh, it makes sense now, right? Like my parents told me certain things. I was a kid. I was kind of like, yeah, okay, cool. And then I have my own kids, and I was like, oh, it makes sense now, And so we get advice. We're given advice, and sometimes we understand it and it clicks, and sometimes we're like, it doesn't really make sense. And then, ideally, we just kind of listen if we believe and trust that advisor, that mentor. But it ultimately falls back to the idea that what got me here can't get me there. That the life I have is 100% based on who I am and how I reflect and interact with different things. And as I learn more, I do better. And that's why you hear me say better self, better wealth all the time. So today we are going to go through a handful of case studies. I'm going to share my whiteboard with you. And then if you just have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. And as I do, I will definitely go through and answer any of them for you. So ideally, the plan right now is to go through three different scenarios, and then we'll see exactly how you'd want to kind of make your decision. Like I'm going to walk you through the decision making process. So I'm going to walk you through my normal thought process as far as giving people advice and helping them figure out what makes sense for their overall retirement. So let's go through a handful of these scenarios. So first and foremost, let's start with who do we think? Should we start with we have someone that received a promotion or an inheritance, right? So let's do this. If you are someone, let's say you receive an inheritance, so someone passes or and they end up leaving you something, right? They're like, hey, you're my best friend, you always took care of me, and I want to show my appreciation. So normally when you're going through the 5-step process, normally the first part of the wealth retirement framework, we normally take a look at tax smart strategies and estate planning. So like that's normally where I like to start things. So when you're talking about, so I'm just going to say taxes for short to make my life a little bit easier for me. So normally when we're first talking about taxes, the question becomes how soon do I have to spend all the money? Right. And so that can depend on where the account is actually at. And so if I'm able to take any of the income out, so how is it sent to me? If the money is sent to you in a like a tax deferred account, and for most of you, that's going to be a 401k, right? It could be a 403b, it could be like a TSA or even an IRA. There are multiple accounts, and sometimes we even seen it as an annuity. And the reason that we care about whether the money is in a pre tax account, a tax deferred account, is because Uncle Sam has been waiting to collect the tax revenue. And if he hasn't collected the tax revenue yet, he is not looking at us where he's like, hey, don't worry about the taxes. Whenever you're ready, Dre, you spend the money, no hard feelings. Or Uncle Sam was like, no, that is not the way I feel. That I've been waiting and this person never spent the money. And now that you receive the money, I'm definitely making sure that you have to start spending some of this money. And if that is the situation where it's in a pre-tax account, so the money has not been taxed yet, it is going to be taxed as ordinary income. Now, without going into all of the variety of different situations, high level, if you are married to the person, then you normally are able, you have a lot more options. You don't have to spend it within a certain time frame. You can kind of roll it over into your own. Uncle Sam considers you and your spouse one person. And because you're considered one person, he's not very interested in rushing the taxing process because in the back of Uncle Sam's mind, the only thing worse than not collecting taxes is, Uncle Sam having to fund our lifestyle. And so Uncle Sam is worried that if this was a two income household, one of the spouses passed, what if I take the money and tax it, and then that person ends up having to file for different government programs? Uncle Sam's like, well, that would be much worse. I should just let them spend the money as they see fit. Because if I'm right and they need the money, they're going to spend it anyways. So I'm going to be fine. If I'm wrong and they don't need the money, oh well, it happens. Hopefully they're sort of around the same age, and then I'll receive the money sooner than later. So Uncle Sam thinks that. If you are outside of that, right? So if you are not the spouse, you normally have 10 years. So we have the Secure Act 2.0, gives you about 10 years. Ideally, if you know you have 10 years, we don't want to wait till we're at around a year 8 to 10. Because if you're at the very end of it, as you can imagine, oh, I just realized I never shared my screen. I'm glad I looked back because I'm like sitting here and I'm going through it. Okay, so we got that cleared up. So I'm glad that worked out. So the reason we're normally year 8 to 10 is because now I have to take all the money out. And depending on how much it is, so let's say you have an inheritance of 250K, or right? And so if you have to spend that in year 8, 9, and 10, at best case scenario, you're going to be spending close to at like 75,000 a year. Where's my calculator? Right. So let me get the exact number. So if you take 250,000 divided by 3 years, at 83,000. So we'll just say 84,000. You'd have to spend $84,000 a year. And if you look at the tax brackets, it's very possible that you have moved yourself into a higher tax bracket. If you wait until year 9 and 10, then you have to spend 125,000 a year. And then it's even more likely that we moved ourselves into a higher tax bracket. So we don't want to be procrastinating. We don't want to just wait and be like, well, the money came in. I'm not sure what to do with it. Should I spend it? Should I invest it? What do I do? Right? Because you want to be able to make the decision to give yourself the most options of flexibilities. So ideally, if I'm waiting, if I think about it early and I get 10 years, well, now I only have to spend 25K a year. And if you're spending 25K a year, assuming that you didn't have something that you really were like, I really want to do this, you've now given yourself the ability to spread that tax burden out over multiple years. And so it decreases the chance of it moving you into a higher tax bracket and triggering a higher tax amount. And so we're like, okay, I like the feeling of that. Now, normally, if we're in the pre-tax account, this is normally a phenomenal opportunity for us to take advantage of Roth conversions. Because if I only have 10 years to spend it anyways, if I move it into a Roth account, that money will now grow, right? Tax deferred. So I won't pay taxes on it each year it grows. And then I take the money out tax free. So I'm winning, right? So those are two great options. If you're thinking, well, Dre, all right, what if I don't do that? Like, if I don't do that, what if I move it into my checking account, right? I pay the taxes is in my checking account. The issue with that is once we start spending the money, right? So if it's in my checking account, once I start spending the money, I will then have to invest, if I'm going to grow my money, in one of three assets, right? So we normally talk about this. So my three asset classes are normally going to be like a home. So it's going to be real estate. It's going to be my own business of some kind. And then it's normally going to be the stock market. And while each of these will historically grow your money, the issue we end up finding is if you have rental income, right, that's going to be taxed. If you sell the home, that's going to be taxed. Now, one will be taxed as capital gains, and the other one will be taxed as income, and a lower income tax rate, where it may be a dividend depending on how you structured your business, or maybe capital gains as well. So it's a lower tax rate, but it is a tax rate nonetheless. If you put the money inside of your business and you have your profits, you're well aware that's going to be taxed. If you put the money in the stock market, when you take the money out, that's going to be taxed. And so here, if you keep it in a year and a day, it'll be taxed at capital gains. Inside of your business, depending on how you structure it and pay yourself out, it will depend on what you'll be taxed at as well. But you can see that for the most part, once you invest the money in something else, it's going to be taxed again. So you already paid taxes once when you took the money out, and then you'll pay taxes again once the money's invested and you take the money back. If you're able to move the money inside of a Roth for Roth conversions, well, as you can imagine, Now the money has grown tax deferred and I take the money out tax free. So I don't have those taxes in retirement. Now, if the choice is between being taxed at ordinary income versus being taxed at like a capital gains for sure, right? We're going to have a much more favorable option. But the choice is between being taxed at capital gains and being taxed at nothing, right? Like no income taxes, then normally we would say that that is going to be the choice that we'd want to make. If I have the option to not be taxed, I'm going to explore that option because I don't want to give Uncle Sam any more money than I need to. And so that right, that's just me. So maybe that's just me. If you want to pay Uncle Sam, you can pay him. You don't have to worry about it. He is going to be there. But normally that is something that I would be thinking about. Now, this is also going to be something that is true, whether or not we're talking about divorce decrees, because you sort of have the same vibe. Someone is going to pay taxes on it. Normally, if you have the divorce decree and you're under 59 and a half, you end up not having to pay the penalty most of the time. But as far as the income, you do normally find that you'll end up being taxed. And so you just want to be able to ideally be thinking about that ahead of time. All right, well, if I have to claim it as income, what am I going to end up doing? And I'll go into some of those strategies for those other approaches as well. And so normally what we'll do, and let me move my screen a little bit over, because I think I can zoom it out a little bit. There we go. All right. So normally what we also want to do, and I normally will recommend for people, is if we are going to find ourselves possibly having to take a larger amount out that might move me into a higher tax bracket, normally we would find a way to reduce our taxable income. So if you can reduce your taxable income, then you can offset that gain, right? So let's say we're a little late in the game. I didn't give myself the option to spread it out over 10 years, and I found myself having to spread it out over 3 years. So what do, Dre? We're going to reduce your taxable income. So you either can, all right, so if you start a business, you can write off a lot of this. Uncle Sam has two besties when it comes to the tax code. Bestie number one is business owners because they provide the jobs. Uncle Sam wants everyone to have a job so that we don't have something crazy like the purge or everybody's running up in Washington, D.C. because they don't have any money to fund their lifestyle and protect and support their family. Number two is Uncle Sam wants everyone to have a house, no one to be living under bridges. So real estate tends to be, allows you to write things off, take a lot, you can write off a lot of expenses. Both are Uncle Sam's two besties. Businesses and real estate, you get to write off a lot of things. So if you have a business or if you were interested in starting one, the only requirement is you got to be trying to make a profit. You can't just start a business and lose money on purpose. Uncle Sam will be very mad at you. But if you start a business and you have business expenses, you can write off trips and dinners and part of your, and you know, if you have a home office, you can work on some of that. There are lots of things that you can do. So we want to lower our overall income. And if we're late to the game where we can't spread out the years that we receive it, normally that would be option number one. Number two is we could consider increasing our 401k contributions or your 403b or whatever your pre-tax account is. Now you're going to be sitting there saying, well, Dre, didn't you just tell me on another video about things like me being taxed at ordinary income and retirement? So why would I do that? And yes, you're right. But in this particular situation, we're trying to reduce our taxable income. If we max out our 401k contributions, which is currently, I think it's at like 23,500, and then if you have the catch-up provisions if you're over 50 or 50 and over, well, then that allows me to lower my taxable income. Where if I was only contributing maybe $5,000 in my 401k, if I bump it all the way up to the 23,000, that is another $18,000 of taxable income that I don't have. So I'm offsetting some of that inheritance, some of the bonus and the different things, right? Like I'm offsetting it. Oh yeah, yes, I have this extra 83,000 that I received in this inheritance or this bonus or this divorce decree, whatever it is. I now have the ability to increase my tax deductible contribution, or at least my tax deductible contributions. So now I'm able to offset it a little bit. And so then the third one that you end up seeing, and a lot of people like to do this, is any charities. So charities, 401ks, or not 401ks, charities, 501c3, or sometimes people like to do donor advised funds. If we're really tight on time, the reason people like donor advised funds is because I haven't been able to, I really ruined that. I have not been able to figure out exactly what charity I want to give my money to. I'm not 100% sure that this is a real charity or this is money laundering for some like famous person. I don't know yet. But I'm running out of time to be able to have that deductible from my income for this particular year. So you'd say, all right, well, in that case, I can place it in a donor advised fund, which is a very fancy way of it's an irrevocable trust, which is a fancy way of saying once the money goes in, you can't take it back, right? It doesn't belong to us anymore. So the money doesn't belong to you, then that gives you the option to figure out, all right, who am I going to give it to? But you get to claim it this year. So it deducts your income that year. And then normally the fourth one that you would consider is gifting. So you may want to gift to the children. So if you place the money in any, I don't know, like someone help them pay for their college or help them pay medical bills and just different things, right? Just gift it to them, help them however you want to help them. Some of these things are able to reduce your taxable income. So again, you're just trying to offset it. Ideally, I have the time to where I'm able to take the amount out. But if I don't have the time or I've received it just in like a bonus, and so it's the year, I just have to spend it this year, and I don't have the time to spread it out, then these are normally what we'll do. We'll try to lower the taxable income for that particular year. And if it gives me the options from there, I'm normally able to offset it in some way. Probably not all of it, because there's limits on each of these, but I'm able to do something for it, right? So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it does. And then, of course, if you're a business owner, then the third one, normally from a tax perspective, when we're a business owner, normally what we're doing is we're going to explore opening up different retirement accounts, retirement plans. You do have extra time to be able to move the money around, and so normally we'll say, hey, how about we open a retirement plan for the whole company, right? You can structure a traditional 401k. You can contribute money and have your income reduced. And, or you could have a solo 401k or a SEP IRA. I mean, there's a lot of them. So we're not going to go through all of them. But the idea is I'm going to put my money in things that allow me to deduct it. And we'll touch on a few more of those as well. So that's the first part of the 5-part plan. Right. Does that make sense? If it does, feel free to give it a thumbs up or a like. All right, so we're done with the first portion with the taxes, and now we move on to the second part of the wealthy retirement plan, which is normally going to be where we start. Actually, there we go. So normally the second part of the plan that we move on to is normally going to be the wise financial guidance framework. I think I need to zoom that back in actually a little bit. I didn't move it. All right, there we go. So we need our financial guidance. So we just went over some of these ideas just talking about taxes, where it's like there's so many decisions that we have to make that we're trying to figure out. Where my tax is going to be, where can I move the money? How will it grow? Because I don't know if I want to. Sometimes the question becomes, "Ooh, Dre, I got a bunch of money. Do I have to keep working? Right? Can I just retire right now? I got the money. I was already saving. I feel good. I'm tired of working. Can I retire now?" And then, of course, the question is, well, let's see what the plan is, whether we're able to do this. Sometimes the question is, how will we pay for healthcare, which is another part of the wealthy retirement plan, which we'll go into. Sometimes it's, am I able to invest this money and live off the interest? There are a handful of questions that we have when we receive these inheritances, these bonuses, these divorce decrees, really anytime you have what we call money in motion, where like, all right, what should I do with the money? And a lot of the time, the question that we're really trying to ask for is like, Dre, I don't want to, I don't want to run out of money, and I don't want to be worse off because I received this, because that just seems like a really bad situation for all of us. So if we had someone that was, let's say, 59, and they received an inheritance or a bonus, and they were going to retire at 55, and now they're trying to figure out, all right, well, based on this, I don't know. Do I need to keep working? Right. I was already close to retirement. What am I going to be able to do? And so normally what we end up having to look at is a handful of things. So normally we need to look at the income that our investments can generate. We look at the expenses that we plan on just having in retirement. What is that retirement lifestyle looking like? How much debt do I still have that I need to pay off? Could it be something that if I paid off one of my expenses, that it then makes it an option for me. And then normally the third one, and the one that I think a lot of questions I receive, is the Social Security, because you have the ability to start receiving it at 62. You receive about 8% increase for each year that you wait, and then it maxes out at 70. And high level, as far as maximizing your Social Security, it's a lot of things that go into that. You have to talk about, do you have the money in some way to fund the retirement? We call them bridge years. And could your inheritance or your bonus or something be your bridge year money? So that way you could wait. But then we also consider health, because normally speaking, around the break even point, and I did another video where I went through the math of it, it's normally going to be about a decade, about 10 to 12 years for most people to break even. So then it becomes a question of health. Do I feel confident in my history, my health, my lifestyle, all these different questions, that it's going to make sense for me in the sense of my retirement? Like, is that going to make sense for me? And if you're able to answer a handful of these questions, then you're able to decide, well, when does it make sense for me to take Social Security? And so we'll normally have to look at these different things. Of course, you have to, and we'll go into that later, you have to also consider your healthcare. And so, healthcare, when you look at things like your HSA account, the cool thing about that is our triple tax benefit, right? The money goes in tax deductible. So I don't pay, it doesn't count as my income. So I'm able to reduce my taxable income. When I receive these large lump sums, there may be something I can do to offset it. The money then grows tax deferred. So I don't pay any taxes on the growth. And then I do get to receive the money tax free as long as I spend it on healthcare expenses, right? Like qualified healthcare expenses. And because we all know that we're going to spend money on healthcare in retirement, and it's almost a slam dunk. Hit the button. It's almost a slam dunk, at least in my opinion, right? Like, it's not. We could do something, but I feel like our healthcare expenses, that we're going to have them. All I got to do is take the money out of my HSA account, and I can spend it on there. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the idea of financial guidance. Is like, am I asking the right questions to give myself the chance to get the right answers? It's not just a question of, can I retire because I have the money? It's a question of, what is this? How does it impact my healthcare plans, my Social Security plans, my overall expenses, in my retirement lifestyle? Do I want to do more? Maybe I'm able to spend some of the money now and fund a lifestyle adjustment now, but it's not a long-term one. So I just enjoy a couple things, and then I kind of get back to business as usual. Maybe I need like a sabbatical almost. I'm just stressed at work. But if I had a month off, then I would want to be able to go back to work, because I don't really need to be done. I just need a little bit of a break, right? If you all had that feeling where you're just like, I just need a little bit of a break. Like, I think I'm cool with you all overall. I just don't want to. I just don't want to be here too long. And so these are normally the things that you want to be able to look at. And then we would take up the overall idea is like, all right, how much money do I want in my retirement lifestyle? Based on the money that I have, how would that spread out as far as the investments, returns, and things like that? And then last week we did the video where we talked about calculating that using a financial calculator, the one that I use, which I love a lot. And so there's normally just like 5 inputs. So you have to say how long we plan on investing the money or spending the money. What's the interest rate of my return? How much money do I have in currently? How much am I going to commit to putting in? And then normally we can tell you the likelihood, the probability of success. And so these are the type of things that we think about as we receive the money, because there's so many moving pieces. It's not just taxes, not just lifestyle, it's expenses, it's the income, and we need to really put everything together to be able to make a decision that we just don't feel bad about. And so then normally what we'll do, and then we're sort of already moving into it. So normally the third part that we already started talking about is going to be the healthcare blueprint. Right. I would just need to erase that because I'm not 100% sure what happened there. So let me remove that. I think I had accidentally turned it on. All right. So there we go. So normally the third thing that we look at is the healthcare blueprint. And the reason we look at healthcare is because healthcare is going to be one of the largest expenses that you have in retirement. And if you imagine, if it's a divorce, then you have to figure out whether you want to pay for Cobra. And Cobra is relatively expensive. The government gives them limits where they can only charge, I think it's maybe like 105% of what the total amount is. But what a lot of us misunderstand is that our job is paying for like half or 60% a portion of our healthcare expenses. And then we're paying for the other portion, even though it feels like we're paying the whole thing, right? For your family plan, you're paying like 500, 600, whatever the amount is a month. So you feel like you're paying the whole thing, but you're really not. You're paying closer to half of it. And so then the question becomes, can I keep my same health expenses and my health or my same health insurance paying the entire amount, paying 1,200 a month? So I used to pay 600 a month. Can I pay 1,200 a month? Because that's what Cobra would offer you the option, And so you would say, dang, I don't know if I want to do that. Oftentimes we have to be thinking about, all right, well, if I go in the exchange or the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare exchange, will I qualify for any of these deductions? Probably not, because you're going to have that. You're going to have that income that you had received. So, do I have to put the wheels in motion before I claim that income so that I'm able to have something that's set up that's workable for me? And the answer is yes, of course. If we're planning ahead of time, then we're great. I often, and it's often overlooked. So, over the life of your retirement, there was a Fidelity study, and I probably can pull it up for you. But it basically said that an individual over the life of their retirement will spend something around $175,000 over the life of their retirement on healthcare expenses. And then they said that if you are, and so that's like if you're single. So this could be your Medicare, your deductibles, your co-pays, your visits, the surgeries, all that jazz. And that a couple, obviously, as you would imagine, is going to be closer to like 350K is what you spend on your healthcare expenses. So then the question becomes, how do I want to fund this? I can, as we had already mentioned, I can place the money inside of a health savings account. If I wanted to go the preventative route, uh, then I could say, you know what, I'm going to get myself a private chef that's going to help me eat very healthy, and it's going to increase my overall health. I'm going to start walking 20 minutes a day, I think the numbers say. If you're outside for about 20 minutes, you get about 20 minutes of the vitamin D, which is from the sun, that you're in a really good spot. And then you lower your stress by hanging out with people that, edify you, help you feel better. And you start avoiding some of the people, you start kind of going with the flow, that you can increase and add years to your life. And so I have been this week, I've been focusing on my VO2 score. For those that don't know, right? So I have like a little Garmin watch. And the long and the short of it is your VO2 score is your body's ability to like take the oxygen and help your body recover when you're like working out or running and endurance and things like that. If you have a low VO2 score, then it makes it difficult for your body to recover. Well, the numbers on your VO2 score tied to your health are like, it's really good science. It basically says that you can add years onto your life if you increase your VO2 score. And without getting too crazy, basically what you do is you're supposed to run at a jog at a pace that you can talk comfortably, but you don't want to talk. So you're not like super comfortable like walking, but you are jogging at a pace that you could talk if you needed to, but it's enough effort that you don't want to talk, right? So that's like me all day. If you're jogging with me, so my wife, she jogs with me, and I know my pace is slower than hers. And she's always trying to talk to me. And I'm like, I need all my oxygen. I cannot talk to you right now. Please stop trying to talk to me while I'm jogging. And then, but I would mess around a couple words, and then I would immediately need a moment to catch my breath. Well, if you jog at that pace, like 90% of the time, 80% of the time, so basically if you jog 5 hours a week, then you would have 4 of those 5 hours would be at that pace. And then the 20% of the time you run at like 90% of your max, and you run for it's like 4 minutes straight at like 90% of your max, and then you take like a 3 minute jog to recover, and then you do it again. So these are like called 4x4s. I think maybe Norwegian 4x4s is what they're called. And so you do that one day a week, or you do that for 20% of the time, however often you jog. And then you would do that. And there's other ways you could do that, but you want to be at 90%. You want to be like getting after it. That will increase your VO2 score over time, and it will increase your health. Right. So there are preventative things that we can do to increase our health, help us out on that. And so we can make those choices, eat healthier, exercise a little bit more, move around, and then we can decrease our healthcare expenses in retirement. Right. So you have these options. Normally what we end up looking at from your healthcare is like, all right, if I have my HSA account, what else do I need, Dre? I would normally say with 7 out of 10 people, right? So I just messed that up. But we'll say 7 out of 10 people will have some long-term care episode. And so long-term care ends up being whether you have to go to an assisted living facility, whether you have home health specialists come out and help you, and you have a physical therapist, all that different things that on average is about like $50,000 a year. Average, it's about 3 years for each of us in retirement. And so that means that we have to have about 150K set aside for that. And so whether we get long-term care insurance, and then normally the magic number is somewhere around like 45 to like 50, because there's definitely a bump in how much they charge you when you reach 60. And that's because they know the numbers. They're like, hey, well, the numbers say that if 7 out of 10 people 65 and older will have long-term care episode, then why am I going to give a lot of insurance to people that are 60 very close? So that they bump it up, they do, or they just decline altogether. But if you're still around that like 45, 50-ish, you can go earlier. It just lowers the amount that you pay per month. But if you're able to do that, well, great. I have that set up. I'm good to go. And then either I self-fund or I use the insurance. So normally that's where we would think about there, because the goal is to make sure that you're able to get the care that you need. I want you to be able to go to the doctor if you need to comfortably without having to worry and make all these decisions. Be able to get your prescriptions as you need them, where your health is your number one focus, not the money. You want to have the money good so that you don't have to worry about the health end of it. And so normally if we know these numbers ahead of time, we're able to start putting the strategies in place to ensure that we don't have to think about our health at all. Right. So hopefully that makes sense for you. And if it does, give me like a thumbs up or just let me know a question and we'll kind of keep it moving, or ask me a question in the comments as well if you want to. And so normally when you're talking about this and you're talking about funding your HSAs and things like that, that's going to be true. All these will be true for each of the people. Healthcare doesn't have as much of the nuances. So whether you're a business owner or whether you receive this as a bonus or whether it was an inheritance, there's not as much nuance in that. These are going to be the things that each of us would want to be thinking about from a healthcare perspective. The only thing that we would really be trying to talk about uniquely with us is when you talk about things like Medicare. If you're someone who's close to 65 and then you're thinking about Medicare, do I want to get the traditional Medicare Part A and B with the Medicare Part D for prescription drugs? Do I want the Medigap plan where I have some of those caps and it's a little bit more predictable? Do I want to have the Medicare Advantage or Medicare Part C, which also includes the ability for me to have dental and vision? Right. So these are the type of things that will be slightly different. Normally, you have to figure out, are you going to travel? Because if you want to travel, then you won't be in network as much, and that would dictate what type of Medicare plan you would choose and how much of the risk you want to take. As with all things in life, the more risk that you take, the ends up being the lower the cost, right? Like if you have a high deductible healthcare plan, that person pays less per month than someone who has a low deductible plan. Because the insurance company is like, well, you're not taking any of the risk. If you spend, or if you like twist your ankle, you're going to file a claim. But if you have a high deductible plan, the insurance company knows that means that you're going to be paying for a lot of these things out of your own pocket. And so they lower the cost because you're sharing the risk. And so you have to really think about your healthcare uniquely for you when we're talking about the Medicare, but the other portions we normally aren't thinking about as much. All right, so then we're halfway there. So that's the third one. Move on to the four, which is the one that I think most people love. Is what about my investments, Dre? Like, what are we doing with the money? And so let's talk about the investments. So normally we're talking about investments. There's a couple things that we're normally thinking about. And the first thing that we're thinking about is when I want to spend the money. So let me zoom this back in. Whenever we're talking about investments, I'm going to ask you, hey, when do you see yourself wanting to spend the money? And based on what you tell me, I will know where we can invest the money or what will make the most sense. Because if you're like, well, Dre, I want to get, and this was someone will say, they're like, Dre, I want the down payment for a home. And I'm like, okay, when do you want that? And they're like, oh, I'm thinking in 2 years. I'm like, okay, cool. And they'll be like, yeah, so we can kind of go, like if we can like double this or something, that'd be great. And maybe it's some crypto or something. And I'm like, no, we can't do that because you need the money in 2 years. So when you need the money in 2 years, that lets me know that this money needs to be relatively safe and conservative because we can't predict what's going to happen in the market, right? Like we just had this first quarter where we're technically, if we're by the technical definition, right, we're halfway to a recession. A recession is 2 quarters of down market moves and economic GDP and things like that. Well, we just had a first quarter that rivaled the past 20 years, right? Like it was a really rough first quarter. Well, what if we were talking 2 years ago and it was rainbows and Skittles, I was like, oh yeah, the stock market's doing great, and I don't have any reason to think the stock market is going to change at all. It's going to keep growing. We'll just put the money, we'll invest it aggressive. It's going to up, and then when you take the money out, you'll have the ability to purchase the house. We only have the down payment. You'll have the whole house payment. Well, that sounds good, but then what happens in 2 years, right? When we're having the conversation. So because you only have 2 years, it doesn't give us a lot of time to allow the market to ebb and flow. That it is a coin toss, and we're not in the business of gambling. We're in the business of investing. And so if you are someone that's like, I have a down payment for a home, and me, that means that that we need to preserve this money. And we need to preserve it because you want to buy the home. And right, we're not investing in something that if it wins, great. If it doesn't win, that's fine too. So if we're trying to preserve the home, then normally with the 2 years, we're going to be in relatively safe. So that could be fix this. So it could be like a money market account. And that could be a CD. It probably wouldn't be cash. I mean that, but it depending on someone's risk tolerance, it could just be cash. Like, hey, you know what? Based on the 2 years and your overall risk and feelings about the market, we should just leave this in cash, right? That like we just will do that. You could definitely look at someone that's going to invest in like some sort of a structured annuity, but normally the fees when you're talking about those in 2 years, it's not normally going to be the best option for you, right? So normally we're just going to try to keep up with whatever a money market account or a CD is, and then depending on what that ends up being, we could expect anywhere from from maybe like 2 to 4% currently, right? So you probably expect something like that. Well, we would see what that would look like, and that'd be the money that we would then take out. We still outpace the savings account with like 0.001%. Maybe that's probably mean, whereas maybe like 1% in a savings account. So we were able to grow the money, put it a little bit to work, but based on that, then we would need to do that. Now, if you were someone that was said, you know what, Dre, life is great. I'm living off my stuff. My business is good. My income is good. I am not going to touch it. Right. So I'm not going to touch it. I'm like, okay, cool. Based on that, then we would not worry about the timeline as much because you're like, I'm not going to touch it for, 5, 10, 20. I may not ever touch it. All right. So then we will look at your risk appetite. And when you look at your risk, we will then determine what makes the most sense based solely on the risk. If you're not going to touch the money, then we're not going to be gambling. We're saying, hey, put it all on black, right? I don't care what your risk assessment says, but normally what we'll do, and then I probably can pull one up for you, is you basically create what we would call investment portfolios, and that would be like model portfolios. Now, you may be someone that says, well, Dre, I actually really like real estate. And so you can invest in real estate and you'd be just fine. You can say, Dre, I have a business and I believe I want to use this money to level up my business. You can do that as well, because if you're not going to touch the money and it's not going to be for a while, it gives you a little bit more flexibility on how we want to invest the money. And so what I will do for you is I will share a little number from Fidelity. And so here they have a handful of portfolios. And so you see they have the US stocks, they have the foreign stock market, and they have bonds, which is debt. Bonds is debt. And then you have short-term investments. So we just talked about short-term investments. That would be like money market, CDs, things like that. And so you look at this and you would see some of the allocations, how it has performed historically. Let me zoom in a little bit. And the reason that, depending on how long we're able to go, is why that matters, is because if I am someone who needs the money in a year, it's a possibility that we can have the best year ever and you're at 31%. It's a possibility we can have the worst year ever and we lose 20% or 18%. And you can see that if we were aggressive, the best year ever, we could have made 136%. We actually could have doubled the money just like you had asked. The issue is we could have lost more than half of it. And so that's why we don't want to be too aggressive at the same time. And so then normally what we focus on is things like how has it performed historically, and then you look at the worst 20 years annualized, look at the best 20 years annualized, and then you see what the returns have historically been with these asset allocations. This is just simply one example of a model portfolio, but that's what we would create. We would create some portfolio looking at the returns that we can get based on your risk tolerance and how long you need the money. And then we would say, all right, based on that, here's one portfolio that we can use. Here's another portfolio that we can use. And then we would create it. There's something that's called, and I won't bore you with all the details of it, but it's called like a satellite portfolio. A very fancy way of saying that it's a mixture of maybe like index funds as a mixture of individual stocks. And then depending on someone's risk tolerance, you can put maybe five individual, maybe 10 individual stocks in there. And then you can have maybe like three sector funds or index funds or something like that. And so there's normally a way where we can give ourselves a little bit more of the upside. And then we can also protect ourselves against possibly not making the best decision. And so you can see that when it comes to investing, it's just a math equation. Right? What's our risk? How long do we have? And then, what am I going to do with the money? Based on that, we can choose an allocation that makes sense for you, that performs better in certain markets. And then depending on how active you want it to be, sure, we can do what's called tactical rebalancing. We can be in the sense that we can read forecasts the numbers and we can look at the way things are going and we can say, hey, for example, who's going to benefit from the current tariff environment? And I know I was listening to the Ford CEO, and it was so funny. He must have said it like 15 times. He was like, Ford is the number one. Like we never left U.S. U.S. has always been with us. 80% of our cars made in the United States. Like 80%. So we feel like we're going to be positioned very well in this tariff environment because 80% of our stuff is made in the U.S. And they're like, okay. And he must have said it like 10 times. He was like we are doing great. And then, obviously they're going to put their numbers out next week for their projections and earnings. And there are several businesses that are like, we're not putting out numbers, which was like, whoa, that's, red flag, scary stuff. Like, we're not going to put out numbers because we don't know how the tariff is going to impact us. So we can't make projections because if we miss a projection, the stock's going to go down, yada, 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 right? You get the idea. And so then they asked them and said, hey, Ford CEO, we're looking at all these other companies that are like, man, this is such a crazy time. We don't know what we're going to do. Are you saying that you guys are, going to be amazing? He was like, whoa, it's the guy who want to say amazing. He's like, but we know that there are certain changes to the tariff environment, that we had some stuff that was maybe like 150% tariff. It was hit with like 2, 3, 4 tariffs. And more recently, they've set it at maybe like a 25% cap on certain ones. And so we said, so we're like, adjusting. And we're not 100% sure if all of our upside right now is because people are concerned about future price hikes, which there's projected to be around August. Without, like I said, without going into too much detail, it says projected to be around August. If there's any price hikes, that's when it would kind of be in the market. So there's maybe a lot of people that are just buying cars now, and then we're not going to have as many sales in August, right? So he set expectations, right? And so that was good. It was a good interview. I thought it was pretty straightforward. And naturally, if you're going to give your earnings report next week, you can't overpromise and underdeliver next week. That would be a bad day for him. So he was like, yeah, you know what? I feel really good as far as our overall position compared to other companies, but it doesn't mean that I feel that we're out of the woods, was kind of like his take. So you would look at that and you may be like, well, let me look at these auto industries or the toy industry was the one that was saying it was going to be really bad. And so maybe I can say, well, who benefits from these tariffs? And then maybe I invest in those companies. And then who's not going to benefit from it? And then maybe I remove my investments if I'm in that environment. And so these are the type of things that you would do if you were someone that was interested in actively pulling strategies together like that, which the whole thing I'm trying to show you is you don't need to, that you can simply find a portfolio and then adjust and match that portfolio and see how it performs historically. Because I like historical because that means we captured the Great Recession, we captured COVID, we captured 9/11, we captured all the wars and Y2K. Then if they go far enough back, you could even say I captured the oil crisis and things like that, to where you're like, oh, look, there was so much stuff built into this number that I feel relatively comfortable, right? Like, and you do. But that's normally what we would end up doing. We would see what the returns are, and then after we considered the taxes, after we considered our growth, and then we consider, well, not our growth, but we consider our overall life and how it's going to impact it as far as the tweaks of the plan. And then from there, we say, all right, based on that, once we have the goals in place, you guys know I'm a big goal-based planner. Cool. Now, how much money are we able to maximize to achieve those goals? And then that's what we would do from there. As far as how you, and then we'll go back. As far as what you then do from there, as far as creating your income streams, right? So we got the investments, so I'm feeling pretty good on that. What do I do to create my income streams? There are a lot of withdrawal strategies, and so it depends a lot on each individual person, but I'll give you some of the most common ones. There's the 4% rule, which is, hey, if I received 500K, Then if I was to live off of 4%, that would be $20,000 a year. And then the idea is if I have an investment that at least generates 4%, then this should never go down. Right. And so if I have investments that achieve more than 4%, it should actually go up even though I'm taking some money out. And so we're able to do that. Sometimes people will take the money out and use that for trips. Sometimes they'll use that to pay their mortgage, where in the sense that, well, if I don't have to pay a mortgage, then I'm able to maximize my check or different things. It just normally depends on what you want to do. Another strategy that you'll often see people use, one of these is called the income strategy. And so the income strategy is I promise to only spend the money not from any of the savings, but only from the income it generates. So whether that money is invested in dividends, whether that money is invested in an annuity, whether that money isn't just invested, I mean, it could be real estate, but wherever that money is invested, I'm only going to live off of the income that those investments generate for me. And then I leave the rest. So my real estate, I don't sell any properties. I just live off the income. My dividends, I don't sell the stocks. I just live off of the income. And then whatever your income streams are, that's what you would do. And then just as a high level, right, 65% of self-made millionaires have at least three streams. Right. So that's kind of the way that the cookies normally crumble. And then the one that I often refer to, as you all are well aware, because there are lots of income strategies. I almost should do a video solely on that because there's literally like 100 of them. But some of them I feel are redundant. They just wanted to kind of get their own name out there. If you ask me, right, that's what I would think. And so normally, if you look at the three bucket strategy, which is the one I normally do, because it kind of combines the best of everything. And so you have your aggressive, which is things you don't normally need to touch for 10 plus years, which, as we mentioned, when it comes to risk, that's how we manage risk. If I give myself enough time, it flattens out the risk that I'm taking. Where if you look at the best year versus on that other chart I showed you, the best year versus the worst year, it's a huge variance. Something like 130% versus losing 60%. But if you look at over 10 years, 20 years, it pretty much flattens out, right? Like it really does. And so that's why normally if you have something aggressive, you want to be able to give yourself that amount of time. And so that would be my aggressive. What is going on with my pen? It is struggle busing. All right, and then I normally have my income or my moderate. And so this is normally going to be, I would normally say anything that's like 3 to 8 years. And so anything that's income generating in my 3 to 8 years, and then my safe is here. And so as a result, I then build my portfolio. I showed you a couple of portfolios where I have a percentage that's allocated towards aggressive, depending on how close we are. But you could say 50% is going to be aggressive. You could say 20% is going to be safe. And you could say 30% will be moderate. And now we have the basis for our portfolio allocation. And then you can have your aggressive. You can say, well, Dre, I have a business. That would be my aggressive. Cool. Then we'll take your business, whatever that is, and then we'll put the rest in the income generating and the safe bucket to offset your business. You can say, I'm gonna let my real estate properties be my aggressive. Phenomenal. Then the same idea. We could take the income and the safe investments and offset that because we do want to give ourselves a little bit of diversification, a little bit of flexibility, so that we're able to weather these storms and the volatility. Right, so those are just three very quick examples. Now, I will say that we do normally want to also, and we were just talking about it earlier, but it's probably worth mentioning from a tax perspective, you do also want to diversify. And so that normally could be money that's in my pre-tax accounts, like my 401k, 403b, et cetera. It could be my money that's in a after-tax account. That would be like my business, my real estate, my stocks, and things like that. Money that's already been taxed. And then you have a tax-free account. So that could be your health savings account. That could be your Roth and your backdoors. And then you could even have certain bonds that the city produces where they're able to give you tax-free returns on those. So I would have those three from a tax diversification perspective. And then depending on how risky or not they are, we would normally make the decision on that. And so just in case you wanted to see it, right? So we're basically saying pre-tax, and then we would say, after tax. So it's already been taxed for me to receive the money. Your money in your checking account, that's going to be taxed. Your money in your 401k, 403b, et cetera, it could be my money that's in a For you to have that money and then invest it in something, that means it's already been taxed for it to be in your checking account. And then, so you normally have your pre-tax, your up-tax, and then you have your tax-free. And then depending on your risk tolerance, how soon you need the money, will determine the returns that we have. And then normally that's how we would go about number four. And so if you have a business, you have more avenues that we can explore. You have a solo 401k, you can have a Roth solo 401k. So you're able to put up to, I think, it's 69,000. And then if you're over 50, you can put even more in there. If you're an individual, then you have a 23,500 in most of these pre-tax accounts. And then if you don't have a job that offers you any of those, you have 8,000 that you can put inside of an IRA or a Roth IRA. Now, inside of a IRA and a Roth IRA, they do have like income limits as far as you being able to kind of write it off, and we won't go into a lot of details of that. But in your Roth, you have to make a certain amount. I think it's like 165,000 for an individual, and like 200 and like 40,000 for a couple, something like that, for you to be able to contribute to those. And so you normally would just say, all right, based on these income streams, the money that I need, how much I want to pay in taxes, I will then put the strategy together, my investments and the return, the taxes that I believe, and then the withdrawal strategy of my income. Because we got to go from point A to point B, because having a whole bunch of money in an account, but you don't have the income understanding, that's no bueno, right? There's no benefit to that. I need to know what the income is of those investments, because they're not all the same. If I invested in a dividend, that's a lower return than if I invested in real estate as far as the income stream. But if I invested in my business and they're able to give me an income stream, that's usually going to be higher as far as just the multiple. Normally, if you have a certain income in the business, people don't expect to, for example, you get 2.5% on dividend. People aren't paying that small of a multiple for a business, right? So if the business is generating $100,000, you would expect to at least sell that business for $100,000. Versus if you buy a dividend stock, you're taking $100,000 to get 2,500, and that's the understanding. It's a 2.5%. So it depends on the income streams that we have. So hopefully that makes sense. If it does, lost connection to your screen audio. What is it? Okay, so I think we're okay. All right, so then we have one left, and we're moving and grooving. So our last one is going to be the lifestyle, and that's the one that I do spend the most time talking about, because that's the one that most people don't actually get to discuss with their financial planners, right? We talk about the money, we talk about the risk, but we don't talk about the lifestyle, what we're going to do with our time. And when we're talking about what we're going to do with our time, I am someone that loves the idea of writing goals out and planning that overall retirement lifestyle. So we're talking about writing goals out. Normally, we're going to have our short term, and that's going to be things that we could do in 1 year, right? So we're talking about a lifestyle. You'll then normally have your medium term goals. And for me, that's still going to be, that's normally going to be things in like 3 to 5 years. And I could even go up to 10 sometimes. And then your long term goals, that's normally going to be 10 plus, almost like investing in many ways. And when you look at long term goals, I normally see that we're able to accomplish maybe 3 to 5 amazing things that are like super big. It takes a long time. People think we're crazy. Nobody believes it's going to happen. And we just are steady in the background working towards this goal. We have our setbacks, we have our wins, we cry, we laugh. And then at some point we achieve it. And everybody's like, oh, wow, that really worked for you. That's such a beautiful thing. Right. And so normally for us to be able to achieve this goal, we have to have that as our number one priority. And then we normally have this as a number 2 priority. And so this would be, and we're talking about goals, we're talking about really anything. You could be talking about travel and leisure. You could be talking about career if you want to do something different, like a career in a business. You could be talking about friendships and family. Could be romance, people we want to meet, places that we want to go. It could be spiritual. Like I want to be able to, go to church more, or the mosque more, or the synagogue more, or whatever your religion is, or just could be contribution. I want to volunteer. I want to give of my time. When you look at your happiness, you will start looking at these things. And for most of us, we are going to be thinking how close am I to my expectation of that? And so anything that we don't feel very good about, we're probably not spending much time on it. Anything that we do feel good about is probably a priority, and we think about it a lot. The question becomes, with the limited time that we have a finite amount of time, we have an infinite number of dreams and ideas and goals. How do I maximize each of these? Right? It's like spinning plates. And I don't want any of the plates to stop. So I need to be able to allocate my time in a way where I can keep all the plates spinning. And it's important that we don't let our short term goals wag our long term goal tail, but it's also important that we don't procrastinate on the short term goals. Because what you'll realize is there are some short term goals that you could start today, that it has nothing to do with being retired, it has nothing to do with money, it just has to do with being intentional with our time. And I know for me, I was like, oh, when everything's great and rainbows and skittles, I'm gonna start taking my daughters on dates. I'm taking my wife on a date. I'm gonna appreciate them. And then I remember just kind of thinking, like, when I went through this even with myself, I was like, that's actually a short term goal. I can do that within a year, even if it took me $10 a check, right? Like, if, like, even in the worst of the worst, if I could put $10 aside, I could still take one person on a date every month. Or I can get creative and find dates that don't cost anything. We like go to the park, we go to the beach, we find different events that are going on in the community that sometimes we procrastinate. We're like, oh, once I have everything right, surely I'll be able to start doing these things. No, 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 no. But if you want to spend more time with family, call them, FaceTime them, write them a letter, visit them, spend more time with them. It may not be the grandiose way that we envisioned it. Yeah, it really is, right? But the way I normally describe it is, think of it like the iPhone, right? So the first iPhone, it was revolutionary, but it's nothing compared to iPhone 15 or 16, 17. I don't know where we're at anymore. I think we're on like 17. Well, what if they just kept going back to the drawing board every year? Oh, there's new technology. Don't release the phone.